Record to the cloud. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. It is evening here on the East Coast. So excited for you all to be here with us. My name is Diane Alvarado. I work part-time with College SA Guy and the Matchlighter Scholars Program to run our FGLI webinar series, which is a professional development series aimed at supporting counselors and CBO leaders who support any number of students that identify as the first in their families to go to college or low income slash Pell eligible. So excited for you all to be here. Again, this is, I think, our second year of doing this FGLI webinar series. So super excited to touch on these topics. Talking about fly-in programs is also one of my favorite topics, as I like to think of myself as a product of the fly-in program initiatives. I first toured my undergrad institution, Dartmouth, through their flying program and fell in love with the campus and institution. So it was a huge gateway for myself as a low-income student and really looking forward to hearing more from our awesome presenters about how it can be a gateway for your students as well. I want to kick us off just with some housekeeping items. So as you probably noticed, this webinar is being recorded, so you will receive a copy of the webinar recording as well as any associated resources from our presenters in a follow-up email. I'm also going to go ahead and put in the chat our webinar and live events page. If you're ever interested in learning more about all of these different topics here at College Essay Guy, including our FGLI webinar series, this is the best page to do it. I believe our website just got a refresh recently as well, so she's looking extra lovely and categorized. And yeah, we encourage you all to use the chat to just kind of interact with each other. You can DM me if you're having any technical issues at any point during the webinar, but we do ask your formal questions to be put in the Q&A box that you should see at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we'll have time at the end to ask questions of both of our presenters. And so without further ado, I'm so excited to introduce our presenters for this evening. We have two wonderful representatives from two amazing schools here in the US. So we are joined with Brianna Conwell, who's the Assistant Director of Admission and Outreach and Access at Colorado College. And we have Denise Wes Rosales, who is the Associate Director of Admission at Wellesley College. Both of them are going to talk a little bit about flying programs in general, and then specifically the programs at their institutions and all of the tips and tricks and things you need to know if you are supporting students who are interested in applying to these programs. So we're going to hear from Brianna first and then Denise, and then we'll move into Q&A. But yeah, super excited to have you both here. And I'll hand it over to Brianna.
Hello, everyone. If you'll bear with me as I get this set up into view mode for y'all. But as Diana said, my name is Brianna Conwell. I am Assistant Director of Outreach and Access here in admissions at Colorado College. I'm also an alum of Colorado College, and I think very similar to Diana's point as well, my funded fly-in was what sold me to Colorado College as a student when I was navigating my senior year and my college acceptances. And so we're going to talk a little bit about both fly-ins in general and our program specifically. So, what is a student fly-in program? So, as you'll see throughout the rest of the presentation and as we talk, there are so many of them. But as Coalition for College defines them, a student fly-in is a fully funded college visit to where travel, lodging, and meals are covered, and sometimes you'll receive a stipend. These are all going to depend on the program, but they often last a few days. They're designed to give prospective students a comprehensive view of the institution. So you're going to be able to talk to people about academics, about social life, about the cultural environments. You're going to be able to see campus both normally in tours, class visits, have meetings with students on campus with faculty, and opportunities to explore campus life. And these are programs that schools really put a lot of effort, innovation, ingenuity, and real passion into, as a lot of us who do this work are really connected to funded fly-ins and with access work. So really take time to look into all of the options. And so, as we'll talk a little bit more, would your student or a student as you are in this Zoom today, would you benefit from a fly-in program? So these are going to be some of the big pieces of the puzzle as you're navigating this journey. So, getting to go to a college is really giving you that firsthand opportunity to see that environment. I know for CC and for a lot of our peer institutions, we're going to offer virtual resources like virtual tours, interviews, chats, things like that. But I really always tell students that the best way to get a pulse for that institution that they're curious about is being able to come to campus and really walk around, see it with your own eyes, get to talk to people, maybe walk around the dining halls, have those hands-on opportunities to really picture yourself at that place. So, with being in those places and in those spaces, you're going to have opportunities for community building. When you're in a fly-in group, these cohorts are going to be spending time together intentionally. Throughout that experience, you're going to be learning together, you're going to be talking, you're going to be bonding, and learning about all of the resources that these schools have to offer and how you can really engage with those both as a prospective student and maybe when you say yes to that institution come senior year if you're admitted. So, when you're thinking about these two pieces together, what we've really tried to do is alleviate the financial burden. I know from my own experience, I was not able to fly out to Colorado College before I was admitted. I was a low-income student from South Carolina, and that was just not something we could afford. And so, when I was reached out to by Colorado College about our funded fly-in, I was like, Mom, you can't say no. They're paying for it. Let's go. And we were able to fund all of the aspects of the trip. So schools will often fund either the vast majority or the full cost of these trips. So you can connect deeply with the community without having to worry about the financial impacts. We'll talk about what all we cover in the CC fly-in later, but you should be able to expect housing, meals, normally flights, transportation of some sort. Okay, so resources. Where can you learn more about college fly-ins? These are two resources I lean on very heavily all the time when it comes to talking with students about all of the options you have available to you. So we're going to talk about two. We have Coalition for College, and then we have College Greenlight. So they're both going to provide information, breakdowns of why you might benefit from a fly-in. Coalition for Colleges is more of like a list with links on a live page where you can see which deadlines are in May, which ones are in June, which ones are in July, and they kind of lay it out more in a general kind of website page. Whereas Greenlight is run by Applebee's website. So if you type in College Greenlight fly-in onto Google and you're looking for that, the website itself is going to be Appley. Don't let that throw you off. It has thrown me off many a time. But they're actually going to have some of that information, and then they have a big spreadsheet that you can open up, and it's got so much information about which school, what the deadlines are, what kind of students and communities they're looking to serve with their fly-in programs. So these are great places to start. And they can also give you contact information if you have any questions about those particular fly-ins and who you might want to reach out to. So next we'll talk a little bit about things to consider when you are applying for fly-ins. We understand that there are a lot of them, and sometimes things overlap. They might overlap with your life. They might overlap with other fly-ins you're curious about. And so we'll take some time to dive into a little bit of these. And so the first one we'll talk about is going to be application requirements. There's going to be some things that we're all going to have in common when it comes to fly-ins, and then there's going to be some things that are a little bit different depending on the school that you're looking at. So you should be prepared to send in a transcript. A lot of us will accept unofficial transcripts, but some of us might have writing samples. I know some fly-ins might have interview components. So making sure that when you're looking into that fly-in, most of the time you will have a portal available on their website so you can understand everything that you might need to submit in order to be fully considered for that program. Another thing for being fully considerable for the programs, you're going to be looking at deadlines. So as you will investigate, some deadlines are as early as May, while others go much later into the fall. So really being cognizant of that, we really recommend maybe even putting in little reminders in your phone on your calendar so you'll know. We'll also send out a variety of emails as institutions to make sure that if you have started that registration, that you finish it. If you are missing some components, that we'll make sure we get those from you. You'll have plenty of touch points with our offices to make sure that if being considered for that fly-in is something that you want, that we do our best to help you make sure that that's accessible for you. As I said just a minute ago, program dates. I cannot express to you how many times we had in our most recent ECC program, that is our spring fly-in, that some students had to leave early because their prom was that morning, the morning that we had departures. So really make sure you have a keen eye on important life events in your own life for the times that you're considering fly-ins. Whether that is school events, that's home life, Maybe that's family situations. Maybe that's another fly-in that you're really considering. Um, we don't get offended if you turn our fly-ins down for other fly-ins that overlap with ours. We personally just want you to choose what is best for you. So just make sure that you are really trying to be cognizant of that when you're taking all of your timelines into account. Next, we'll talk a bit about eligibility and intent. So as you scroll through the different resources, you're going to see that some fly-ins are a lot more broad in scope, whereas some are a lot more specific. So that's information that you should be gating each school's fly-in that you are curious about to make sure that you're overlapping with programmatic themes, or if there are specific citizenship requirements for those programs, you want to make sure that you know that ahead of time. You can definitely ask directors of these programs for more information on these questions, especially these questions in particular, if you're concerned. I know I co-manage our fly-in here at CC, so I will share my contact information towards the end of the presentation, but I know I don't want to speak for every institution, but what I hope is that all of us are able to make ourselves available as resources. So if you have any questions, that we'll do our best to be helpful. And then lastly, for transportation, you will be working with the schools or their schools' respective travel agents to book travel a lot of the time. So don't hesitate to reach out with concerns, especially if you're traveling for the first time. I know working with the populations we work with for our funded fly-in, I worked with a lot of students this year who coming to CC was their first time ever on a plane or ever out of state. So we definitely understand the barriers, the fear, the concern that some of these things might bring up for you. So we would really encourage you to reach out to us if you have anything that you would love to just chat about. Next, we're going to spend some time talking about Discover Colorado College, which, like I said, is our funded fly-in in the fall that I co-manage here at Colorado College. So if you are curious, our application for DCC launches tomorrow on May 1st, which is so exciting. The application deadline is going to be July 13th, 2026, and then the program date runs from October 2nd to October 4th. So we want to give students time to make sure that they have ample opportunity to consider other fly-ins, have ample time to book their flights as well. So ours runs a little bit earlier into the end of the school year, a little bit of the summer. We also want to give students opportunities, say if you want to attach a letter of recommendation or something from a teacher, that we launch this in enough time for you to be able to talk to your teachers before the summer starts. So, a little bit of a breakdown of our program. So, who are we looking for? So, Discover Colorado College is open to rising seniors. So, if you're graduating in the class of 2027, and is available for gap year students. And this program is centered to the experiences of historically underrepresented students, socioeconomically disadvantaged students, or for students for which visiting CC would be a financial hardship, first generation to college students, and students at Title I schools. That's not to say that you have to meet all of these criteria. And if you don't meet these criteria, but you feel that you'd still be a compelling applicant and really would love to be considered, please feel free to apply anyway. These are just some of the types of students that we see really benefit from this program and that we kind of build in experiences to help provide more access to. And so during our program, you're going to have a lot of opportunities. It is a very, very busy 3-day program. But these are going to be some of the things that you're going to be able to experience. So you're going to experience our academic model, the block plan, when you're taking a mock class during your visit here. Um, the block plan, as to not go too much into our time together, we are one of 5 in the world that run on the academic model that we do. And what it is that instead of taking 4 courses all at the same time throughout the semester, your Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, and your Tuesday, Thursdays, and bouncing between those, what we do is you still take 4 classes a semester, but you take them one at a time for 3.5 weeks at a time, and then you get a break after every class. So, if you have more questions about that, we can definitely chit chat about it, but making sure that students have an opportunity to sit in on a mock class and really understand how the block plan permeates life here at CC is something we really prioritize during your time here. Next, you'll be able to go on tours of campus in the greater Colorado Springs area. It is a really beautiful location. We are about a 10-minute walk from downtown Colorado Springs, and it's a beautiful flat walk. So really getting a chance to go out, see the sights, whether it is downtown or on little trips that we take you throughout the experience together. I'm really getting to know the second largest city in Colorado's offerings and community that you might be stepping into. We are one of less than 100 schools in the US that meet 100% of demonstrated financial need. And so during your time here at Discover Colorado College, we are making sure that we have sessions and availability with our student financial services to make sure if you have questions about our need-based financial aid systems, or you want to talk through a prospective kind of financial aid package, we build in sessions to have access for you to talk about that, whether it's with us fully as a group or with our staff at Student Financial Services. We also have sessions where you'll be discussing how to make a compelling application for your admit year, if that is something that you're curious about. And so, whether that is hacking our supplement or talking about how to really articulate your story and make yourself stand out, we have multiple sessions as well built into our programming where you're sitting down with myself, my colleague Saul Maravilla, and then our associate, my boss, Alfredo Gallegos, to really have that hands-on opportunity to talk about what we're looking for. We also can take off our CC hats for a couple minutes to talk about just things you might want to consider in college applications in general. Like I said, as a first generation to college student, and a lot of times those are students we serve in this program, you might not have a bunch of people to ask these questions. So we want to make ourselves available as resources so that you can really ask and really get the intel that you think would really assuage some of the panic and make you feel like you had a more well-rounded experience. And then lastly, we're going to have affinity discussions with current CC students after our club fair on the second day of the program, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a second. But we have opportunities for students to be removed from staff to where you are sitting with current students to talk about what CC life really is like. So now we're going to break into some of the programmatic offerings that we have during our fly-in. So as I said a little bit, we're going to have an inside track on financial aid. So you're going to be able to have multiple connection points, and then you will also have access to financial aid open hours as well to make sure that no matter when in the program you have those questions, that you really have someone to be able to connect with. One of the workshops that we offer specifically is on hacking the supplement. So, a lot of colleges will have a supplemental question in their application. And so we want to take time to make sure that, if you've not had an opportunity to talk with somebody about what a strong supplement might look like, what you should really be leaning into, what are the questions beyond the questions, and in between the lines of questions that colleges are asking. We want to take some time and really be intentional on I'm talking about our supplement, but also just about supplements at large, and helping students really lean into telling their own narrative and telling it well. With the Affinity Conversations and Club Fair, we're going to be hosting it. We host it in our Bemis Great Hall. It's a really great venue, and it's also part of one of our dorms on campus, where we host a dinner, and then we have a bunch of different club fairs or clubs on campus come together to set up, whether that is cultural organizations, maybe it's a dance group that's coming. We have Greek life come sometimes. So you're going to have a variety of different perspectives available during this club fair to talk about what engaging in club life looks like at CC. And we're definitely one of those institutions where getting into a club as easy as going to the club fair, signing up for information, and showing up. Our clubs are not competitive or hard to get into. We're a very community-based space and institution where we want our students to be as involved as they want to be. And so after the club fair, we have the opportunity for those affinity conversations where all of us staff we leave, and you'll go off in smaller student groups to be able to talk with current students as prospective students about what does diversity and equity look like on campus? Where do you find support? Where do you find community? And how do you really bolster that sense of belonging on campus? We also take a visit to Garden of the Gods, which is one of Colorado's most famous geological structures. We do a little hike if you're so inclined to want to hike. If you're more about hanging out, there's plenty of spaces to sit and chat with your friends. And we also do a fun little group picture. We do Garden of the Gods if the weather permits. Sometimes in the winter it doesn't permit, but that is always our goal is to get out there because it's a really cool space. It's just another opportunity for you to explore Colorado Springs outside of just the bubble of campus. And then when you arrive on your day of arrival, we do a scavenger hunt where we will have CC students that work for our admissions office be split up with incoming groups from the airport to go downtown on a scavenger hunt where you earn prizes by the end if you finish the scavenger hunt. And then each student, when you arrive to campus, you are given a $25 gift card that we provide for you to spend across a bunch of different locations in the Colorado Springs downtown area, which I think is really fun because there's so much available. Whether it's restaurants you want to get a quick snack at, bookstores, we have some like boutiques and thrift stores. If you want to get boba, there's so much that's going to be available at your fingertips with just a quick walk. Next, we'll talk about required and optional materials that you can provide. So the first one is going to be very much required. It's going to be that academic transcript. When you're thinking about CC and you're thinking about the block plan as a whole, we're asking you to do a semester's worth of material every 3.5 weeks, 8 times a year. So that's not to say you have to have all A pluses to get into CC, but we want to see that you are academically admissible. We want to see that you're doing well for yourself and how you're engaging with rigor as well. So whether your school offers AP classes, IB classes, dual enrollments, your own accelerated or advanced curriculum, we're looking to see for your grades and how you're choosing to challenge yourself and how you're doing in that challenge. And those will need to be from your grades 9 to 11 for that full consideration. I know sometimes people will do semester programs elsewhere or things like that. We're going to need copies of all of those transcripts that you might have. For us, we have two supplemental essays that you will write responses for in our application, and we'll go over that a little bit more in the next slide. Then you'll have an opportunity to provide extracurricular information. So you can add kind of what you're doing with your time outside of class. I know when I was a junior in high school and I was working on my list for my future college applications, I didn't put anything about the 20-hour-a-week job that I had. And my best friend was like, "Why would you not put that in your activities?" And I said, "Well, that has nothing to do with school." Well, we're looking at a lot of quantitative data. So we're really looking for those bits and blips of your personality. They show what really matters to you. And so if you have a job, if you have a family member that needs a lot of physical mobility aid and you're the person who takes on a lot of that work, say you're the eldest sibling and you're spending a lot of your own personal time taking care of your younger siblings or driving them around to things, please tell us about that. You could also upload a copy of your resume if you think that that would be easier. So whichever path works for you works for us in that regard, but we just want to get a better understanding of what matters to you and how you choose to spend your time. And then lastly, we do have an option for you to present your test scores to us in the application. That being said, we are test optional and no harm here at CC, so don't feel pressured to share those with us if you don't want to. I will say test optional and no harm. That's very much a square is a rectangle, but rectangle is not a square situation. There are a good amount of schools that are still test optional, but they are not no harm. So just make sure when you're looking at that information across colleges that you're making sure that if they are test optional and you want to submit your tests, that you're looking at those middle 50% SAT and ACT ranges. But for us as a no harm institution, what that means is that if you do submit test scores to us and they fall out of our middle 50% for the SAT and ACT, if they don't somehow uplift your application in another way, we are able to remove those from our consideration. And just to give you some statistics of how that works for us as an institution, 57% of the students we admitted last year didn't even submit testing to us. So, test scores will never be a make or break in your CC application, and we definitely don't want you to feel that way during your fly-in application. So it truly is no pressure. If you want to submit it, do. If you don't want to, you don't have to, and we're not going to question why you didn't submit those scores. Next, what are we evaluating? So when we are going through our reader forms, I'm one of the main readers for our DCC applications. We're looking at three separate themes. So we're looking at that academic preparedness, right? We're looking at your transcript, we're looking at the rigor that you're choosing to engage with. Next, we're evaluating your writing. We're doing that in a couple different ways. We're evaluating both in the strength of what you've submitted and in the quality of answers to the connection of the question. Did you fully articulate yourself in the prompt? Was it written well? but it didn't address the prompt. Was it written well? And it got to everything that we were looking for. So whether that is a guidance counselor, friends, if you want to have an extra set of eyes on those supplemental essay questions, we always recommend that. Just because the stronger and more work you put into that writing, the more we can advocate for you to have a slot in a really competitive program here. And then lastly, we are looking at the ability to see you as a student as an active community member and change maker on campus. We are looking for students that are really engaged. That doesn't have to mean that you're a voracious leader in your community. That can mean so many different things. But how do you choose to connect with your surroundings? How do you want to see yourself connecting with your surroundings in college? So think about those sorts of things as you're answering our supplemental questions and really articulating yourself. I do want to say, please don't feel discouraged if you apply to DCC and you're not admitted. We have some really tough decisions to make in our process when we're narrowing down who we're inviting into this fly-in, and we're looking for students that stand out in all three of the areas that we're evaluating. You might be an incredible academic fit, but maybe you just don't articulate the way that you are involved in community and how community really resonates with you. There are a variety of ways in which you might not fully meet all three marks for the program. I will give some context for just admit percentages wise for our program. Our fly-in program is one of the most competitive rounds of reading that we have for our overall cycle as a whole. So just because you're not admitted to DCC does not mean that you're not a competitive applicant for CC. We really don't want anyone to feel down or feel bad about it. And please keep in contact with us, as we will also be keeping in contact with you if CC is something that you really want. Next, with the supplemental questions, we ask two. These questions give us a better snapshot of who you are as a student and how you'd intentionally engage with our program. Be sure to be specific in your responses, as again, they help you make a stronger application and they help us advocate for you better when we're in committee and we're talking about students to really make those hard choices. So that first question is going to be about our student body having a diverse community, and how you would describe your background and life experiences contributing to your identity and values, and explain what kind of role you'd aim to play in the Colorado College community. We're not looking for anything specific when you're talking about community. That can really be broad. When you're really thinking about what resonates deeply with you and what would you want us to know about you, really lean into that, right? It could be so many different things. That's not a question behind the question situation. It's just a way for us to get to know what speaks to you and what really matters to you. The next question is going to be looking into resources we have at CC. So when I send out this PowerPoint, all of these underlined pieces are going to have links. So different links for support services, academic departments, research opportunities, or student organizations on campus. Take some time to peruse those. Which ones of those excite you? What could you really picture yourself engaging with? Again, and the more specific you can be, the more that we can read your essay and be like, wow, she really does seem interested in these things that we offer on campus. We can picture him engaging with these clubs, or we can picture them doing this research that they're excited about. So the more thoughtful you are, the clearer picture we can have of you when we're considering you for admission to our fly-in. And then next, submitting materials and next steps. So you'll be able to submit your materials on our website as you work through the application. Keep in mind that we are looking not only for academically capable students, but we're looking for change makers. We're looking for students that are involved in their community, however that speaks to you. Once you submit that application, you will get a confirmation email, and then in that email, you're going to receive next steps. So we do our best. There are a lot of emails you will receive. Maybe not a lot, but a good amount to where if you're like, oh, I really was looking for that information, and you search in your inbox, you will be able to find that for sure. And so, in conclusion, fly-ins offer incredible opportunities to explore and learn about the places you might want to call home for the next 4 years, all without the financial burden of trying to make that work without our help. So really take advantage of these opportunities. Like I said, when I did my funded fly-in, I had never been to Colorado before. My mom had never been to Colorado. And so when we came together, by the end of my funded fly-in, at the beginning, she was like, it's cold, it's wet, I don't want to be here. But by the end of the fly-in, she'd asked me if I had committed yet. And it was really impactful for me to have that moment of support from my family. And so I committed that day while I was still on campus. So whether you're looking at a bunch, you're looking at a couple, we really want to try and make our campuses, our resources, our communities available for you as students, and as support systems as well. So please take advantage of these opportunities. They really, really can be life-changing. So thank you for sitting with me today. Like I said, I co-manage Discover Colorado College. So if you have any questions from this webinar today, please feel free to reach out to me via my email. It's bconwell2024@coloradocollege.edu. We do have a website for Discover Colorado College on our CC website. So if you go onto our website and you type in Discover Colorado College, that link will have a lot of information that we've talked about, as well as a lot of other stuff that we didn't have time to chit chat about. But thank you for your time, and I will go ahead and pass the screen sharing off to my next colleague.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Brianna. I'm gonna go ahead and pin Denise and remove your pin. We have some awesome questions, but we'll get to all of those because I'm assuming there's going to be a bit of overlap during Q&A. So for now, I'll hand it over to you, Denise.
Awesome. Okay. I share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see it. Um, so although we just talked a little bit about fly-ins, I'm going to pivot a little bit and just cover a couple things that I wanted to bring up that also relate to what Wellesley College offers. So this is basically the same content that Brianna was just talking about, but something I wanted to specifically highlight is that in regards to student fly-in programs, um, what schools are starting to do more recently is that some schools may be offering some local versions of this program. So instead of multi-day overnight visits, they might run for a single day, for example. They still offer the on-campus experience, but without the lodging. Um, and these programs really vary in format, but they do share the same goal, which is essentially to expand access and giving students meaningful exposure to the institution. So just keep that in mind as I move through the next slides, which again may be cover the same things that we just talked about, but I wanted to highlight a couple of different things. So again, when considering what to consider before applying, I know it was mentioned about counselor documents and transcripts. I always like to mention what that also most of them do include short essays. So in regards to planning, it's always important to take time to draft it, whether it's like draft it yourself, making sure students are getting their second and third reads, making sure for any any writing mistakes or anything like that. That's also a really important thing to consider before applying is making sure that you're doing it in a timely manner. Again, deadlines, very similar. As you could see, Colorado College's application opens tomorrow, so as early as May, but there are some that open up throughout the summer months. So it's just important to keep tabs and make sure that you're able to keep up and know when the deadlines fall. Some programs even offer multiple deadlines or even a priority deadline. So just another thing to consider. Um, and then program dates, very much the same thing. They can fall on the same day as any high school programming. But something to consider as well is that some of these programs might actually not only fall on weekends, but they could even go into weekdays. So making sure you're checking your calendar, but also understanding, does that mean your student is going to miss school? Does that mean you're gonna, need to be excused? How is that going to impact your classes, studying, things like that? So that is one thing I wanted to just highlight. And then continuing about things to consider. Eligibility. So there are some programs that do have specific eligibility, whether it's regarding status or any, identity-based eligibility. So just make sure you're looking at their websites. You can also ask questions. We are always, as counselors, very excited and happy to take on questions. Um, and then some last things I wanted to mention is really just thinking about transportation. As someone who's worked with fly-in programs in different aspects, it is very typical that for many of our students, it's the first time that they're flying for this first time flying ever when attending this program. So making sure it's important to have a conversation with students and making sure they feel comfortable potentially traveling alone. That might, again, it is very different. It is scary going somewhere by yourself, especially if it's flying might be a new thing. So that is just also something that tends to be overlooked. So those conversations, just making sure that your student is comfortable and kind of tips and tricks for someone who's never traveled before. Um, and then the last thing is really kind of tying everything up is like, what are you hoping to gain from it? So really students, like, why are you going there? Like, what are you going to gain from this experience? So really understanding the program itself and what it's offering is really important as a whole. So I'm now going to pivot and talk a little bit about what Wellesley College offers. So we have a program called Access the Wellesley Experience, or we call it AW. It's AW for short. Fun fact, when I created this program, I actually had AW as like a placeholder, but it was a very, it was actually a very popular name that people really enjoyed. So we ended up going with it, and I thought it was very funny. And this is the branding we created for it. So I also wanted to just provide some context. So at Wellesley College, we did have a traditional fly-in program pre-pandemic, and so when the pandemic came, similar to other colleges, university, we pivoted to a virtual format. That virtual format was called Voice. Some of you may or may not be familiar with that, and it was our virtual, quote unquote, virtual fly-in, excuse me, and there was an application process. It was about a 2 to 3 day programming that occurred virtually, and again, it was pretty much that typical um, fly-in program, but except virtual. And we didn't really have a fly-in. And so we had a virtual series called Amplify, which really was a leadership series. So when I was on campus, I was like, I would love to actually have a fly-in. Would that look like? And really think as someone who also works with in regards to like overseas recruitment in our office, I really wanted to think about what areas we're maybe leaving out, for example. So I actually wanted to start small when thinking of a fly-in. And so I wanted to do a quote unquote local fly-in. Instead of calling it a fly-in, I call it a drive-in, which I will talk about in the next slide. But basically, I really thought about that virtual fly-in aspect. I didn't want to take that. I didn't want to take that little portion away. I still thought the content was important, but I also thought that that information really should be accessible to everybody and not just a certain group or just to like any students who did apply, especially because it was a free program. So we pivoted and voice we actually combined with our leadership programming. Now it's called Amplify Your Voice. And it still serves like an access virtual programming, but it's now there's no application for it and it's open for any students. And we have multiple sessions throughout the fall. So still didn't want to take that aspect away, but really thinking about pivoting to something a little more traditional, but with an edge. So that is how awe came to be. And you'll hear me saying awe, but you can also call it access the Wellesley experience. Um, and just to talk a little bit about who is intended, who's invited and who is really what we're targeting in this program. It is really intended for students who may be first generation, low income, or from communities who have been historically excluded from higher education. But essentially, the only real requirement is any high school senior living or attending school in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Southern New Hampshire, or Southern Maine is welcome to apply. I did want to provide context that last year was the first year that this actually took place, which I'm very happy of. It was a great program. And we might be shifting this year, most likely like 90%. We are going to open it to New England. So we really are thinking about that, those individuals in our backyard who are still potentially might have barriers to coming to campus, for example. And then the program itself, it is a day-long immersive experience that provides students the unique opportunity to explore Wellesley and connect with the community itself. So our staff, our current students, our faculty, while also trying to like learn about what it would be like on campus. And during this day, students are spending time in sessions talking about selective admission, affordability, the liberal arts and sciences curriculum, among other things. And I will talk a little bit about what exactly we have done in the past. And here is a glimpse of some of the programming. So. The day really starts with, it's not on here, but it's really a welcome. So we are very fortunate to have our dean be present and address our audience. And this program itself is specifically just for students, so families are not invited. We really wanted it to just be um, a student program. But we do have an admission workshop, and our admission director will actually present and do an interactive workshop with our students and break down the college application process while offering practical tips and insights. So really just breaking down, okay, what is this is a transcript that we might see. How are we as admission counselors looking at it? And maybe what are we looking for? Same thing with the essays, letter of recommendation. So really a step-by-step of the application itself. That's actually also an opportunity for our students to meet and ask questions to the director them herself. So that's a really incredible experience. We also offer a mock class. So we want students to really get a feel of our college academics. And we talk about that liberal arts and science curriculum. But really, as someone who really learns by doing, we wanted students to really experience a real class taught by professors. And so we actually are able to offer multiple mock classes for students to attend on different topics by real professors. And these classes actually exist. So they're real classes, they're not made up. And students can actually get a feel of what the class would be like, what that liberal arts curriculum we are talking about is. Um, Lunch in our dining hall. So we also want to give the experience for students to really not just eat in our dining hall, but also connect and chat with current students. So you are able to eat in the dining hall, but also you're joined by current students to have like some real-to-real conversations. That's also where staff aren't really around, and it's kind of like the students' time to just ask questions and kind of get a feel and have a taste of the food. And that is something that's really important because we know that food is important for anybody and everybody. And that is a big conversation starter at any college and during the college search process. Um, we also implemented a tour, but beyond a standard tour that we offer during our usual information sessions in our admission office, you'll accompany one of our current students who's also an admission ambassador through a typical day at Wellesley. So they'll still hit some of the really like key parts of campus that we want to make sure you're seeing, like the library and residence halls and things like that. But the whole point is that these students, they're doing different things throughout the day, whether it is not just attending class, but they're maybe going to practice, tennis practice, or they are doing research for a lab. And so like really following them around about their day and seeing where their favorite places on campus are, whether it's to study, to hang out, but also like if it is an athlete, where are they going to potentially like how long is the walk? Like what's that look like? And really just get a feel of like a typical day for our students, which and is another way for our students to connect with our current students to connect with prospective students and get them asking the real questions. Other aspects that are not included in this are actually the we also offer a financial aid session. So we really want to break down a what financial aid is, but specifically as a school that is we fulfill full need and we are need blind. We really want to make sure students understand what that means, but are also thinking about their other institutions that may offer different things. That, what a merit scholarship versus what a grant is, how work study works. And that's where they are able to talk and ask questions to our really awesome financial aid advisors. And we also have a student resource panel. So we invite the different offices on campus who support our first gen low income students and just give them space to talk about all the resources that they provide. And again, allow students to have the opportunity to meet them, mingle with them, ask questions. That is really important for us, for students to get to be able to have space to ask these questions. Now, the application itself, there are a couple recommended materials that we do look for. We do look for a high school transcript that does include grades through junior year, so from 9th to 11th. Um, Unofficial copies are accepted and usually are what are sent our way anyways. And we also do ask for a list of anticipated senior year courses, so as to know kind of where, what your senior year will look like. We also require a short essay, about 250 to 400 words. And then again, back to eligibility, we are looking for high school seniors. And again, to that point of students who live or attend school in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Northern New Hampshire, or Southern New Hampshire. But again, this might pivot to New England very soon. And I know we talked about the short essay, so I wanted to also highlight what that essay is. And so our supplemental essay reads, Wellesley students actively seek ways to build bridges and to change the world for the better. Tell us about an experience working alongside people of different backgrounds and or perspectives from your own. Why was this important to you, and what lessons from this will you bring to Wellesley? Fun fact, this is also our supplemental essay for the actual application of Wellesley College. So that is very intentional. Um, it not only gives students kind of that really big head start of the application itself, but students who do apply to AW are actually able to use this same essay for their application. So the cool thing is you're kind of already ahead of the game because you wrote your essay. And so I will say a lot of our students, a majority of them did continue using the essay they used for the OP program when they did apply to Wellesley. Um, but we also take time in the actual program to talk about what we're looking for in these essays. So students do have, if they do attend AW and then choose to apply later, they do have the option to rewrite their essay if they want to maybe make it a little different, or if they want to make a completely new one, they have that choice. So you could either use this or not, but it already gives you like kind of a head start to the application itself, which is pretty awesome if you kind of think about it. So um and really I just wanted to I know that there was a lot being said in all of these different slides. But really, some key takeaways I want our audience to walk away from this presentation is first, do your research. So again, um, knowing that this specific presentation for and program for Wellesley is a local fly-in, we do get questions about, is it open to students from these states? And we do have to say no, but we do have still that virtual program that I mentioned because we didn't want to take that away. But again, really doing your research in regards to what the programs offer and who is eligible, making sure that, when you might be spotlighting it for students, making sure that is something they would be eligible for. Um, like I said, there's multiple deadlines. So for all, actually, we had two deadlines. The application tends to open in mid-June, and we would have an application. First application would be due early July, and then the second would be due mid-August. So there are different deadlines. So sometimes some programs like ours will have multiple, some will have priority deadlines or even just one. So just making sure you're tracking deadlines to make sure you're getting everything you need on time. Um, I mentioned understanding the different types of programs that are offered. Again, there's that multi-day one. There's with the overnight component, some that like mine are not multi-day, are just one day um, with no overnight component, but the whole purpose is we still provide all this great resources and we cover your costs to come to campus and to go back home. And so that's really goes to our next point of being fully funded opportunities. So that is something that I get questions about a lot as a counselor is like, what can I do to come to campus? And I might have some barriers getting to campus. And so there are fully funded opportunities and they exist. Making sure you ask questions throughout. Like I said, as counselors, we are very, very used to getting a lot of questions and we expect them. We don't assume that you're going to know everything. And sometimes, just asking questions is really the best way to figure out if these programs are for your student or just make sense for what your student is looking for. Um, and then lastly, keeping program dates in mind. So, like every student, even when applying to college, students might apply to multiple fly-ins. Wonderful. Some fly-ins might have the same date, might have the same date that the programs are running. So just making sure you're keeping track of if you're actually able to go and participate. But keep track of those dates, make sure that your students are able to go, and also that you might have to end up choosing if you get into multiple fly-in programs and then the same date, that might just be a conversation you have to have with your student. Um, that is all I have. I am happy to share my contact information, but I also wanted to make sure I left time for questions, which I do believe I see. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to uh,
Yes, beautiful. I'm gonna go ahead and bring Brianna back as well. Okay, wonderful. Thank you both so much for all of that information. I think it's also something super special for counselors and students to kind of have fly-in programs be personified in a way because it could be a little bit of an intimidating process and difficult to navigate when you are looking at all of these different programs that have wonderful components. So we have gotten a couple of questions throughout the session. I'm going to start with some of the more general ones that both of you can answer. Some of them being, what is a typical size of the students that group of students that you bring in, like percentage, like whatever information you guys can publicly share, but like percentages of admit rates. And then we also got a couple of questions that were related to whether or not, participating in these fly-in programs increases your chances at getting in, which I'll interpret as like, is that a form of demonstrated interest for your institutions attending to these programs? So I'm assuming both of you might have some stuff to say on that.
Sure, yeah. Um, so in regards to, I just want to make sure that I understood the question correctly. In regards to percentages, do you mean like the percent of students we admit into the program based on like applied? Okay. So for us, we normally receive about between 400 and 500 applications um, per year for DCC, and we will normally admit around 80 to 100 students. So it is a pretty competitive program for us. That being said, we might make the program smaller in the coming year, so it might become even more selective. We're having conversations about that, but hopefully we're trying not to make it too competitive. But that being said, applying to the fly-in, even if you're not admitted, does count as demonstrated interest for us. So if you do apply to the program and you are admitted, we do typically like to work within the ethos of our office of admitting students that we think would be academically competitive during our other application rounds, because we would really hate for, oh, will you admit us to my fly-in, but then like you didn't admit me. So we try to like we try to make that gap not super huge. Um, but then for the students that we're not admitting again, like it could have been a variety of reasons why we didn't, but we will have on our reader form when we're talking about the student and like maybe why we didn't admit them. It could be like maybe their grades weren't competitive, and that could be a vastly different conversation versus they were really competitive and compelling, but like just barely missed out. And so we're looking at a lot of things. And so normally when we're reading a file, if it comes in for a regular admissions round, we might glance at the DCC app to see if they were admitted or why they weren't admitted. So that can play a role. It might not be a huge role, but it is something we're definitely looking at.
Yeah, and for awe, so like I mentioned, last October was the first year that it actually launched. So it's a newer program. So we don't really have historical data to go on for that. But even so, we do have a cap of attendance for the program. We typically try to get no more than 50 students for the program. I will say we had more applications than spots. So we really are trying to think about students, we're really trying to give them the opportunity. But again, kind of, we do note that as this program is becoming a little more known, there might be more applications coming in, but we're really looking at applications and um, similar to my colleague, really trying to see there's not going to guarantee of admittance to Wellesley. But again, if we're already getting a glance at your application and your grades and transcript, and you're a competitive, someone who's going to be competitive, likely we would want to bring you. And it does, it also for us does indicate demonstrated interest. Not only are you applying, but if you're attending the event, you're coming to campus, you are able to meet with people. And we actually this year were able to extend the early decision deadline for our all participants. And so that was a little perk we gave them if they were interested in doing early decision. And I will say for most of our students who did apply, um, for Wellesley afterward, there was a good amount that applied early decision. But again, we're still gathering data because this is the first year that we did it. So we're looking forward to what this upcoming year will look like.
Mhm. Awesome. That is so, so, so exciting. And then we get a couple of more specific questions. And so just to recap, AWT is more of a local kind of drive-in program that is aimed at kind of serving students that are geographically located pretty close to the institution. We got a similar question for CC, which is that are you mainly looking for students that would be flying in, aka live a considerable distance away, or is that program also open for students that live in Colorado or a different part of Colorado or places close by?
Absolutely. And that is something we're currently navigating with language of trying to figure out, do we still call it a fly-in if we want Colorado students to come to campus? And the answer is yes. If you are supporting Coloradan students, you are a Coloradan student, you are more than welcome to join us. We definitely encourage it. And that would just in the way that you would apply for the program when you would get like the email confirmation, you would be someone that we could have as drive and like reimbursable for your drive. So any mileage or things that you acquired during your trip to campus, you would be able to submit a W-9 and be able to be reimbursed for the drives and stuff. If you are in like Denver or something and you're like, I don't want to fly, we literally have that question happen every year and we're like, don't worry, just drive. We'll cover your gas to have you go home and back. And we also have when we have our fly-in, since it is multi-day, for the Coloradan students, we do offer the opportunity for them to have a hotel room and stay with us as a group just to help build more intentional community. And so if you want to drive and just stay with us in the hotel for those couple days, that is also covered as Coloradan students.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for that. And kind of similar, I guess, to both programs, but particularly for a more kind of national flying program. What do you recommend for undocumented students who don't have documentation to fly? Does that transportation kind of stipend cover ground transportation, Amtrak, bus fare, things like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and I know, we're getting students more locally, but I will say for ours, I mean, no one's really flying to ours, but in that case, if we did have students who were flying, we would still, for us, it's really transportation, period. And so we always are asking students what they're comfortable with. There are some students who might not be comfortable in an Uber, for example. And so we want to accommodate that and make sure that maybe we'll get them a different mode of transportation. But for undocumented students locally, they can either drive themselves, we can do mileage reimbursement. Most of our students have done Ubers, but we also offer trains, buses. So it really just depends what the student is comfortable with.
I will say for us in particular, we also try to be cognizant of those sorts of things, for sure, because we never want to put a student in any form of danger or like severe discomfort or anything. I will say during my time at CC, we have admitted DACA or undocumented students, and the ones that we have admitted either like chose other fly-ins or weren't able to make it for other reasons. And so we've not actually had to navigate that in my time as a student or as someone who's worked here, and we've not had to navigate that with students. That being said, those are like constant conversations we are having. And just wanted to make sure, I think especially with we were having conversations about what was happening at the airports pretty recently for our most recent flight of making sure that we were like doing preemptive outreach to students to make sure that all students felt comfortable. And if they didn't, how are we going to try and pivot and make sure that that was something that was safe and comfortable for all of them to make sure they can get to campus.
Awesome, thank you. We have a couple of counselors asking about just kind of the eligibility for these programs in comparison and with respect to eligibility kind of in the overall college application process. So someone asks, is the range of competitive GPAs for accepted flying students similar to the GPA range among students who are admitted to the college during the regular college application process?
I can kick that off. So for us, just so people know, Wellesley College doesn't have a range, a GPA range. So I get asked a lot, like, what's the typical or the average GPA? We actually don't even recalculate GPAs because we understand that schools are just so different in how they evaluate, whether it's narrative transcripts or 4.0s, 5.0s, 6.0s. There's a lot of different scales. And so we're really looking in regard and context to your community and your school. And so that could really vary. So I know it's kind of like a ongoing thing where a lot of admission counselors say it depends, but it really does depend because of where the student attends school. So I will say for the most part in all our students have had um competitive GPAs, but not all of them are, the first in their class, and that's okay too. That's not always what we're looking for or expecting. We really are just excited to have students who are excited to come to campus, and really, again, GPA is just a part of the application for us who do holistic reviews, so that's not an end all be all for us, and especially for this opportunity for in regards to college access, we don't want to limit that.
I think I would echo a lot of Denise's sentiment. That was very well put. I think for us, we don't share like an average GPA. We share some other average information. So if you go onto our class profile, you can see average SAT and ACT. You can also see like percent of valedictorians, but also percent of top 10 in their class, things like that. I think just to reiterate, I know we do want to make sure that like when we are bringing in a student that we can understand that like life and extenuating circumstances happen, and like if there was a significant dip in a GPA, like a student can have a space, or we really encourage them to explain maybe why something like that happened. We can understand if like something big significant in their life happened to cause like that C or the drop from all A's to like a lot of B's. We can be so much more lenient and flexible once we have context. So even if that's just encouraging your student to send us an email to say, I've submitted my application, you're going to see these. I just wanted to provide some context about why that happened. And we can admit students in those types of situations with a lot more faith than we would be able to if we just see like a slew of like B minuses and C's with no context. Because both of us, we work at really highly selective institutions that are rigorous in their models. And so we don't want to do a student a disservice of admitting them to a program that might just not be what they're really hoping for and what they really need academically.
Yeah, awesome. Very well put, both of you. And then I have another question that reads, for students who don't get accepted to a fly-in, are college admissions reps available or have other resources to, like how you had mentioned, Brianna, help students hack the supplement? So I guess I'll interpret that more broadly as like, for students who aren't admitted to the fly-in programs, are there like other ways that they can engage with your institutions, demonstrate that interest, even if it's not through the program specifically?
Sure, yeah. I will say last year we did start a pilot program called Beyond DCC, where it was programming set aside for students that we thought were like really competitive and compelling, but maybe just didn't fit the parameters or just barely missed out on the scopes. Or for students to sign up if they really were interested and they wanted to just let us know that, despite not being admitted to the program, but they still wanted to be connected to the institution. So we had multiple different workshops open that we're sending out that information for to say, this is a workshop that's specifically focused on writing. This is specifically focused on building community, and this is specifically focused on clubs and orgs you might see on campus. And all those again are going to track as demonstrated interest. But again, we want to give our students as many options as possible. So we didn't have a big turnout for those last year, so I don't know if it will continue this year. But then lastly, I will plug if that is something we don't have the opportunity for, whether it's virtual information sessions. We have on our website, if you go to our Office of Admission, and you go to the staff, we have both our staff is like the traveling faculty, but then we also have our student ambassadors. And they have their email address, what they're interested in, what they're involved with on campus, what their major is, where they're from. They really love when students reach out and ask them questions, because they really are able to kind of give that one-on-one care and attention. And so I do think if there is a student who doesn't get into our program and really wants to have access to more of those resources, please feel free to send one of us an email because we want to make sure if there's anything we can do to be helpful that we are doing it.
Yeah, and just something quick to add to that for us. Again, like I'm very big on um just because someone doesn't get admitted to something, I don't want to take the opportunity of that important, great resource away from them. So, Wellesley has actually been putting together some like access virtual sessions that are open to anybody to attend. Again, they're not exactly like awe, but still that encompasses really like talking about the application in the summer before they're even started. Because we also understand like sometimes students might just not be able to also attend fly-ins because they have to work and it's really hard to take a day off or family responsibilities. And so even so, we want to make sure that those options are available. So that's also why I instead of like getting rid of what the previous virtual flying used to be, I just combined it with our leadership program to still make it something in the fall. But still, and we do talk to students who may be not admitted to all to we encourage them to attend those, but we're also offering things in the summer now so that we can still offer things earlier on in case students aren't able to potentially attend, knowing already, like I can't take the day off, period. Like, what else am I supposed to do? And we record those sessions so they can also access them at any other time.
That's awesome. Thanks, y'all. We had another question that I'm happy to answer, but also happy to hear if either of you have any additional thoughts, which is, we heard from two different structures of fly-in programs. This evening, like Brianna had mentioned, there are a lot of different resources that showcase all of the different fly-in programs available in the US. The most primary one being College Greenlight's kind of annual list that is updated, that comes through Appley. And so there was a question that said, do most fly-ins cover travel for the student and a family member or counselor, or is the student expected to travel solo? And so my understanding is that I would say a majority of kind of fly-in programs are for students kind of anywhere in the US to fly in, but it usually is just the student. I think there are a couple of different institutions that have fly-in programs where you can bring a parent or family member. There are counselor fly-in programs. I will also try to find the link to our session on fly-in programs from last year, which was hosted by someone at Tulane who also kind of runs the counselor flying program. So that is also an opportunity that you all can take advantage of. So we'll kind of share all of those resources. The college greenlight list is definitely super duper helpful. And I know that somebody else had asked, what is your most accurate and up-to-date resource for locating other colleges that promise to meet 100% of demonstrated financial need? Um, we have an awesome resource that we look to, which is Apple. It's actually through Appley as well. They have kind of an updated yearly list of colleges that meet full need. So I'll drop that in the chat. I'm sure other counselors here can also chime in with kind of their favorite resources. There is another map here that might also help kind of visualize colleges that meet full need. And trying to keep that up to date year to year. So additional resources that might be helpful for you all as you are thinking about the programs that are the best fit for your students. Obviously we understand that some students come from backgrounds where like traveling solo is just like not going to be possible. And so maybe there's a specific type of program that would be a better fit for them as well. Think we have like one more question that I might wrap with, but any other questions that folks have, or any other thoughts on kind of different types of flying programs? I know that like the admissions world is also really connected, so maybe you all like just know of different programs and lists and opportunities, but from my understanding, those are kind of the main ones. Um, Beautiful. And then have an awesome comment from a counselor and audience member that we know and trust, which is really just kind of reiterating and naming that, obviously for these flying programs, having to make some really tough decisions, but also like wanting to reassure counselors and students. And I'm sure both of your institutions admit many more students, in the actual college application cycle than are admitted in summer programs. And she had kind of named that kids sometimes are always looking for reasons to think they're not worthy. So just wanting to hear from both of you that there are instances where a student might not be accepted to a flying program, but still be a good fit and be accepted later on in the regular decision round. And I know that you both have kind of alluded to that this evening, but anything else on that, on kind of just like counselors supporting students in their application journeys, both through fly-ins and the actual college application process? Any thoughts there? Beautiful.
Um, I was gonna say that yeah, like I mean, as somebody who myself, like I am first gen, I was first gen low income and I went to a it was actually technically now that I'm thinking about it, it was like a drive-in because it was right near where I actually live, so I didn't really have to do much. But um, I think that that self-doubt is always there about like, I won't apply because well, why would such a great institution want me? And and even if like that one step of like actually submitting the application being getting that no is hard, but I will say like even in this first year of awe there were some students that we turned away and they still applied with us and we actually did admit them. So remembering that we only have a glimpse of the application. Um, and so we don't have the whole picture, and we're not going to have the whole picture until your student applies, until you apply. So, even if it's a glimpse and we say no, we would still love to see who you are and how you're doing in your classes. So sometimes, it might be that grades are just not where we want to see them in junior year, but when you're applying for a regular decision, you usually have senior year grades, and those can differ very much, and those could actually be super beneficial. Or even just writing and then even anything like that. So really don't be discouraged. And again, that's a small glimpse of what we see as a whole application. And so don't feel like just because it's a no now, it's going to be always a no. That's not the case.
I just wanted to add super briefly, I think our pools for our fly-in have similar trends to our Questbridge pools as we are a Questbridge partner. And we end up matching with 15 students through Questbridge every year, but then we normally admit between 30 to 50 students with their Questbridge applications that they just forwarded to us. And those are students that didn't match to other institutions that we find really cool and compelling. That was how I was admitted to Colorado College. I didn't know enough about us during my ranking process to rank CC. And then once I did match with a school and I was sending out my applications, I was like, huh, that block plan sounds really cool. And so I was admitted through submitting my Questbridge application in regular action. And so I think we look at those kind of similarly. So if you have a student who did apply to our fly-in, we're going to have very detailed notes about like how we felt about the read, and maybe it was just, we were still missing something, or it was just a scope, but we have a lot more flexibility with our regular rounds than we're going to have for our fly-in because it is such a small scope. So we don't ever want our students to get discouraged, and we try and share data and I guess like Purviews, my colleague who's also on my team, he also found CC after attempting to match and not matching anywhere with QuestBridge. So like we have people that work here that were told no originally and then found us through other pathways. And so we don't ever want anyone to be super incredibly discouraged.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as counselors and educators, I can definitely uh, just like name that I think we all are just looking for our students to be at their best fit schools. And I think that one of the best ways to research that and learn what a best fit school looks like is by visiting these schools and taking advantage of all of these opportunities. So, if nothing else, I hope that this has inspired the folks here to do some research and find some schools that might be good fits for your students, and encouraging them to really go for those opportunities that can allow them to really engage with those institutions deeper as they're thinking about their college lists, as they're thinking about senior year, and what might be to come. So I speak for everyone when I thank you both for being here this evening, and for sharing all of that awesome wisdom and anecdotes and just some really awesome information for our counselors to take back to their schools and students. As a reminder, a copy of this recording, as well as the public facing slide decks and any links that our presenters talked about, will be in a follow-up email that will be sent to you all later this week. And I think otherwise, I wish you all the best with the remainder of your academic school years. Thank you both, Denise and Brianna, for being here. I really, really appreciate you both. And we look forward to seeing you at the next FGLI webinar series session, hopefully in May. And so keep an eye out on our webinars and live events page for some more information. But otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your night, everyone.